Hello and welcome to Darkhaven Lore. This video is about Grombrindal, a legendary dwarf from the Warhammer fantasy universe. The White Dwarf is the legendary dwarf known in Khazalid, that's the dwarven language in Warhammer fantasy, as Grombrindal, which roughly translates as the white bearded ancestor. He has been given many names over the centuries, but this is the one by which he is most widely known. Every dwarf, from the youngest beardling to the most wizened longbeard, can recite the saga of Grombrindal from memory. An epic tale that runs into many hundreds of verses, the saga of Grombrindal tells how this dwarf of legend strides the mountainous paths known only to the dwarfs, appearing unannounced at times when his help is needed most. A few quotes about him show his mysterious and mythic status amongst the dwarves. "I swear, I never saw a beard so white or gold as on the features of Grombrindal, a veteran quarreller. The last rays of crimson sunlight bled across the battlefield as the sun set over the day's carnage. The last handful of dwarf warriors had held off the goblin attack, but with the coming of the night goblins, confidence would be bolstered. They would attack again, and this time they would leave no survivors. One by one, the battle-weary dwarfs began to chant their death songs, one by one, until only a single cloaked figure remained in resolute, defiant silence. Anonymous dwarf." Grombrindal is an enigmatic and mystifying character in the world of Warhammer fantasy. No one knows where the White Dwarf will appear. He turns up wherever and whenever his folk are hard pressed. When the odds are against the dwarfs, he comes. He has been seen many times throughout the long history of the dwarfs. His strange and unexpected appearance in the darkest hours of battle is recorded in many sagas. Each time he appears, the tide has turned back in the dwarf's favour. There was a time when Uppbeat the Doomed and his folk were surrounded by goblins. When all seemed lost, the goblin horde shrank back in dismay. Uppbeat's clan warriors were heard to whisper in awe, "The White Dwarf." Deep in the midst of the foe, the white-bearded one could be seen swinging his mighty axe, cutting a swathe through the ranks of the enemy. Inspired by the sight, Uppbeat's folk, though bleeding and exhausted, took heart and surged forward one last time in a desperate effort to reach the White Dwarf, who stood alone amid the goblins. When the victory was won and Uppbeat gazed across the stricken field, the White Dwarf was gone and no trace of him was found, except for the heaps of slain enemies. A shrine to Grombrindal now stands in this place, one of many throughout the dwarf realms. Another example of him coming to his people's aid is at the Battle of Whale Bridge, when Grombrindal held the causeway against a horde of goblins, and the arrogant goblin boss was decapitated with a single blow. Similarly, at Bitter Peak, when the numberless rat men were put to flight by the woefully outnumbered miners from Barrack Far, a white-bearded ancient holding their tattered ranks together with shouts of encouragement. So too it was at Cragmere, when the mightiest dwarf heroes of the age crushed the advance of an army of beastmen, orcs and goblins. These tales, and 1,000 more besides, all bear testament to Grombrindal's heroism and the miraculous nature of his arrival, always appearing when the flame of hope is guttering and the spirits of the dwarves are at their lowest. The origins of Grombrindal. Some say that the White Dwarf is none other than Snorri Whitebeard, the dwarf king of Karaz Akarak, who was the only dwarf to receive due and proper respect of the high elf Phoenix King of Ulthuan. That was long, long ago, though, before the War of the Beard, and if it is true, then the White Dwarf is truly an ancestor, and in some uncanny way must have crossed the bounds of mortality. These rumours are no doubt aided by the fact that the High King swore on his deathbed to return to his people when their need was greatest. Others claim that he was once a paramour of Velea, Velea being the dwarf ancestor goddess of home and hearth, healing and brewing, the wife of both Grungni and Grimnir. She is the founder of many dwarf holds, including Karaz-a-Karak and Karak 8 Peaks, and a protector of the dwarf race, and beloved of all the dwarf gods. Whatever the truth, the saga of Grombrindal contains these and no less than 43 other suggestions. The White Dwarf is a hero from the time of legends, and the knowledge that he walks the world today fills every dwarfen heart with hope and pride. First mentions of the Great Dwarf come from the time of the War of the Beard. Like an avenging spirit, he had appeared at the first battle against the elves, when the ancient alliance had been shattered by discord. He is also known to have participated in the Battle of Tor Elessai. As tales of the fighter's prowess spread, he was given a simple name, but one now that conjured up images of bloodshed and vengeance: the White Dwarf. In the saga of Grombrindal, it says that he wanders the World's Edge Mountains, following the old dwarf ways disguised as an aged prospector swathed in a great cloak. He accepts a swig of good dwarf ale from any traveller he meets, and in return offers them a prophecy. Many are the times when a strange lone dwarf of this very description has been seen in a dwarf camp on the eve of a great battle, keeping his own company. Sometimes such a figure has been seen walking the ramparts of a besieged stronghold, and this is held as an omen of victory and hope. The following day, during the battle, the White Dwarf has appeared, bedecked in all his regal panoply of war, like some ancient king of legend, a true ancestor, a figure come to life from old dwarf carvings. With ancient fire blazing in his eyes, Grombrindal reaps a bloody tally upon the hated foe. On the eve of a battle, when dread looms over the hearts of the dwarf host like a dark shadow, beardlings and longbeards alike stoke the watchfires a little brighter and keep a tankard of ale aside in case a grey-cloaked stranger seeks to join the throng. In battle, Grombrindal is incredibly powerful, and this is in part due to some of the truly epic items he wields. The rune helm of Zufbar. Those dwarves who have glimpsed the awesome helmet worn upon the White Dwarf's troubled brow have described the sight they beheld. Runesmiths have identified this magnificent helmet as the lost rune helm of Zufbar, which vanished many years ago when that particular stronghold was overrun by greenskins. The Glimril scale armour. After the Battle of Thrarg, in which the White Dwarf slew 10,000 warriors of chaos to rescue the foolhardy Ungi No Chance and his folk, a single scale of armour was found clenched in the teeth of the Chaos Lord. It was a metal totally unknown by the dwarf folk. The runesmiths were completely mystified and called it Glimril, believing that perhaps it had been forged by the ancestor gods themselves. The rune cloak of Velea. The runes embroidered on the great cloak worn by the White Dwarf display without doubt that it was woven by Velea herself. At least one saga relates that Velea, the dwarf ancestor goddess and protector of the dwarf folk, fell in love with the White Dwarf on account of his magnificent white beard and gave him the cloak as a token of her esteem. And lastly, the rune axe of Grimnir. The mighty axe wielded by the White Dwarf answers the description of the rune axe of Grimnir, mentioned in several sagas and legends. Perhaps Grimnir, a warrior god, gave the weapon to the White Dwarf. Grimnir the Fearless personifies the courageous nature of the dwarves. He is especially popular amongst the cult of the Slayers, who revere him as the Slayer god. Well everybody, there you have it. If you ever find yourselves outnumbered and desperate, then perhaps praying to the ancestor gods will bring you the support of the legendary Grombrindal, the White Dwarf. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to speaking to you all again soon. Goodbye.